Shalom. Morning, guys. All right.
Morning.
All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Lamed. We are in middle of learning this question of whether the Eruv is determined according to one individual's needs, what he needs to have for 2 meals, or do we say that if it's mazon shtei seudos for the average person, that will be a valid Eruv for even, like we finished in the last topic, even a glutton, even a rafton, right, can separate an Eruv, what it will be considered seudos, 2 seudos for a average person. So there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. We've also learned about various laws regarding nedarim, as we had in our Mishnah in the beginning of this Perek, that if a person makes a vow, min hamazain, he's mutter in mayim and melach, because mayim and melach don't nourish a person. We're going to go back to various topics that we learned also in Masechta Brachas regarding the brachas, regarding the bracha of boidem min mazonos. Do we say this on rice? Do we say this on cooked rice? Does it satiate you? Does it sustain you? V'chulei. We're going to be speaking about like the Mishnah had the machlokes tanoim, whether a nazir can designate wine for his eruv, whether a Yisrael can designate truma for his eruv. Also going back to the same underlying theme, whether the eruv has to be for you or whether if the eruv is good for people out there, it's going to be valid for all. We're going to have a phenomenal shita, bishitas beishamai. According to Hananya, beishamai holds that not only is mazon shtei seudos not sufficient for an eruv, we're speaking here about eruv techumen. Not only the way Rashi learns, does the person himself or herself has to go to the place where they are taking in Shabbos. They have to be ma'arev beraglov, but more than that, they have to bring all of what they will need for Shabbos. Not mazon shtei seudos, all of the food. Now, if a person is only going to eat 2 seudos on Shabbos, you have to have 3 seudos. It's not only about food. You have to bring your kalim. Everything that you will need for Shabbos has to be at the place from which you are measuring the 2,000 amas, with moedic details regarding that. And we're going to be finishing up interpreting various parts again in the first Mishnah in the Perek regarding whether you can put an eruv for a kohen in a beis hakvaris, whether you can put an eruv for a kohen in a beis hapras, and a lot more. Chavra, let us start on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. We left off 5 lines from the top of the Amid. Umi Amar Rab Shimon ben Elazar Hacha. So Nachma, what we finished learning on top of the Amid is that a glutton's eruv is not determined by the food that he eats for 2 meals, but as he mentioned, that it's enough to designate what 2 average people will eat. So asks the Gemara, and we're going me'inyan le'inyan, we're going now to the dinim of Tuma. If there is a corpse in the house, not only is everything under the roof, Tamei b'tuma soil, but also the entranceways, the doorways also are Tamei. Now, what happens if you have a couple of very small doorways, small meaning it's less than 4 by 4, and there is one doorway that has at least the size of 4 by 4, which means it makes sense simply because of the size that when the mace will be taken out of the house, he's going to go out of this larger doorway. That automatically makes that all the other doorways themselves don't have tumah. Okay, now the question is, what happens if you have a giant like Oig Melech HaBashan that's in a house and you have many doorways and they are all more than 4x4, but there's only one that's large enough to be able to put the body of the giant like Oig through it. So says Rab Shimon ben Elazar that Oig Melech HaBashan Pischai Kimaloi Oig, that since there is one opening, when there is one opening, that the fullness of the body fits through that one only, it's automatically matir, it takes away the tumah from all the other doorways. What does that prove? That proves that when it comes to the laws of tumah, we look at the individual person. Even though normally if you have various entranceways, if they are all more than 4x4, they are all tamei. They are all tamei. But if you have a giant like Oig, I'm saying a giant like Oig because there's really a machlokes tanoim whether Goyim, whether Oig Melech HaBashan Bechlal gives off tumas oil, and we don't need to say that this brisa, this Rab Shimon ben Elazar is Bechlal going into that machlokes. It can mean a yid. It just means that we determine these halachis of tuma individually according to the size of the person. So l'chayda, the same should be by an eruv. Says the Gemara, no. That Abai explains why you cannot compare one case to the other. Hassan over there, what else will you do when you have a corpse in the house? If there would not have been this very large entranceway, or if you will choose to take him out of a smaller entranceway, what are you telling me? You're telling me that they're going to have to dismember the body to take him out? Who would do such a thing? So when it comes to the dinim of Tuman Tara, if it's clear that the mace will be going out of exit A, yes, custom over there. Then we say, since we know he's going out of exit A, exit B, exit C, exit D, don't have in the doorway, there's no tumas mace. Masha'enkin here by Eruv, not all the halachas of the Torah travel on the same track. Here we are insisting, and certainly that is the sheet of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that we follow an average person, and the amount of meal, the amount of food does not need to be customized for that individual. I just want to remind everyone that we did have in the top of the Braisa that we don't say that always. Actually, if you have an older person, or if you have an ill person who eats very little, lakula, we do allow us to say, oh, that person only needs a smaller amount of food for 2 meals, and that will also be enough. But that's lakula. And as we just finished learning yesterday, that we are lenient when it comes to the shiurim, because the whole din of Eruv to begin with is a din derabanan. Okay. Who asks the Gemara, they asked in the yeshiva that pligi Rabbanan alei Rab Shimon ben Elazar regarding the din of Tuma. So it's now that we quoted this Braisa, do the Chachamim argue with that? Or do they agree with him? When it comes again to a mace, to an Oig Melech HaBashan type of body, that if only one entrance or exit is large enough for his body to fit, that is matir that says that the other entranceways, Bechlal, will not become tummy. So Tashemam, and we'll prove it that yes, they do argue that the Amar Rabba Bar Barchan Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that even by Oig Melech HaBashan, Pischoi Ba'arba'a, L'chayda, that means the normal din, that if you have one entranceway that's 4x4 tfachim, and the other ones are smaller, then and only then do we say that only the 4x4 becomes tummy, the other ones do not. But if you have many psachim, and they all have 4x4 or more, then we don't know which one will be used, and they are all tummy. Says the Gemara to the answer, no, that you have no raya from that statement from Rabbi Yechanan that the Chachamim argue. Hasam over there, the Ike Psachim Ketanim Tuva, that statement is referring to a scenario where there are many entrances, like we learned in the beginning of this topic, that all of them are less than 4x4. The Ike Chad, the Haba Arba, and one and only one is 4x4 Tvachim, the Vadai Kikomarvach, everyone is going to agree that Bechlal, he won't fit through anyone, but you will start with the one that's already bigger. And that will conform with the general rule that what? That if you have one entrance that's 4x4 and all the others are smaller, only that one is tummy and the other ones are not. Now, that does not mean that the Rabbi Yechanan, who's going to be following the statement of the Chachamim, won't allow us to use the same concept if you have many entranceways that I'll say are 10 by 10, but one is 100 by 100. Maybe they're also, even the Chachamim will agree to Rab Shimon ben Elazar that only the large one will become tummy. Okay, we're coming back here to Hilchos ERUVIN. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'ar kol nevad v'ay. Amar Rab Chia bar Rav Ashi Amar Rav Ma'arvin b'basar chai. As we learned yesterday, some people eat raw meat, and it could be used for an eruv. Amar Rav Shimi bar Chia Ma'arvin b'beitzim chayos. You can designate raw eggs for an eruv. We Russians used to have something called guggle muggle, if you remember, from your baba or from your mother. Says how many eggs are needed from us on Shtei Seudos? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Achas. Achas l'chayda, one raw egg would mean that for him, the raw egg was probably lifton. So one raw egg, in other words, people will have as a dip with their bread of a meal, a half a raw egg. So you have one is good for 2 meals. And Sinai Omar, interesting. Remember the end of Brachas? Sinai refers to Rabbi Yosef. Sinai Omar Shtayim. One raw egg for each meal. So you want to make an eruv with only eggs, you have to put aside 2 raw eggs. Okay. So now, like I mentioned in the intro, the Gemara basically, the whole Daf Lamed is going to be tying up and explaining the various other dinim that were discussed in the beginning of Bakoil Ma'arvin, in the beginning of Perek Shlishi. After the Mishnah mentioned that Bakoil Ma'arvin chutz mimayim umelach, the Mishnah gave another example where mayim umelach is excluded from all other food types, and that is hanoider min hamazoin. So then the din will be muter b'mayim u'b'melach. So says the Gemara, are you telling me that melech u'mayim are the only 2 food types, the loy ikra mazin, that are considered something that don't sustain? Kol mila, but everything other than that obviously is called mazin, which is why if a person says the words I vow to abstain from mazin, that person will not be allowed to consume anything other than mayim melach. If that's the case, so leima to have it to yufta the Rav Shmuel. This will be a refutation to Rav and to Shmuel. We had this in Brachas that Rav Shmuel Amir Taravayu. Unlike other shitos that hold that a mazoinus is made for cooked or baked rice, they are the ones that say that in because they consider mazoinus to include 2 details. That's what we learned in Brachas: something that satisfies your hunger, and something that is soyed as halev, which means it strengthens your body. And they hold that only mazoin means both, and the only food items that both satisfy your hunger and they sustain your heart, they strengthen your body, is a product made out of the chamisha saminim, right? Wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye, and not cooked rice. And l'chayra, our Mishnah will refute that shita, because if a person is noidem min hamazain, everything is included in it. The person may not eat anything other than mayim and melach, clearly against Rav and Shmuel. Now, if you remember, in Brachos, we already refuted Rav and Shmuel from another din. So the Gemara wants to understand why are you doubly refuting them? So the Gemara says, I know that, but still, lema to have it to yufta, does our Mishnah also refute them? So Amar Afuna, no, that the Rav and Shmuel would amend our Mishnah, or they would interpret our Mishnah, that our Mishnah was that the vow was ba'omed kol hazon, anything that satisfies. Well, satisfying comes from everything. Satisfying doesn't mean that it's sustaining you, but it's satisfying you. The only 2 items that are not zon, that do not satisfy you, is mayim umelach. And indeed, mayim umelach chudulay zaini, but kol mili, everything else satisfies you. That means if a person is hungry, they're not going to feel that hungry. Now, it doesn't sustain them. According to Rav and Shmuel, only the Chamesha Saminim are going to be soyed as halei, but that's not the case of our Mishnah. Correcting Gemara even on that. How can you say that all other foods, aside of mayim melach, at least they relieve your hunger, right? They're zaini, they satisfy. We had to say again in Brachas. There we were speaking about peiros genoisar. There are extraordinary fruits that grew, and then when Mashiach will come, will grow in Eretz Yisrael. And Rabbi Yochanan used to consume sometimes tremendous amounts of them. So this is this record that Kehavos Vilne Basli de Rabbi Yochanan. When we were walking behind our teacher Rabbi Yochanan, when he was going to eat Peder di Genoisar, which was near the Kinneret, Kiavin and Beimeya, the point there we're trying to make is that Rabbi Yochanan used to eat 1,000 of fruits at one time. So if there were 100 Talmidim, all of us affording each other an opportunity to be Mishamash Rabbi Yochanan, have a man ketina l'chol chad v'chad asara asara, each one carry 10. If we were only 10 students, Rabbi Yochanan needed to have the same 1,000. So have a minaktinon l'chol chad v'chad meyo meya, everyone held 100. And how large were these fruits? This is all part of Rabbi Bar Chana's record that v'chol meya minayu, that every 100 of these fruits, whether you read it with the law or you don't read it with the law, let's go with the law. Well, you have a machzik lohutzana bastalas osavi, that 100 could not even fit into a basket that had the size to put in it 3 sa'a. In other words, there were very large fruits. And something that's sweet. You have a sweet tooth, you can eat and eat and eat. And Rabbi Yochanan ate all of them. And after he ate v'amad, he said, Shvu'asa, I swear, that I'm not full. So, Pedes Genoisar, don't make you full. So the Gemara clarifies, Ema Mizaina. What Rabbi Yochanan said was that I have not eaten something that's sustaining me. In other words, there's sustaining food. It didn't sustain him, like we mentioned. Sustenance doesn't come from everything, but satisfaction comes from everything other than mayim umelach. And in our Mishnah, a person made a vow to abstain from anything that satisfies. And that's why the Mishnah says, obviously, the person cannot eat anything chutz mimayim umelach. Obviously, this person is going to have to be mataneder. Well, let's go back. Amar Afuna, Amar Av. Shvua sheloi oichel kikarzu. If a person makes a vow not to eat, and the emphasis is on the word eating, this bread, can that person use this bread for the Eruv? So says the Gemara, says Rafuna in the name of Rav, yes, ma'arvan laba. Why ma'arvan laba? Because he never swore not to have hana'ah. When he's using the Eruv, you don't have to eat up your Eruv, you're benefiting from your Eruv. Other people can eat. And that's the topic, that's the whole topic of Daf Lamed, as we began with the sheet of Rab Shem ben Elazar. Not the size has to be custom made for you, right? The glutton who himself needs to eat a lot of food doesn't need all that food for the Eruv. Other people can eat that. He doesn't have to eat it. He's having Hana, fine. He only made an oath not to eat it. But if, right, the first white line, if he says, Kikar zu olai, guys, we're going to learn this in the Darim. Kikar zu olai implies, according to him, that it's not only it's forbidden on me to eat, it's forbidden on me, period, which implies I may not have Hana, then ema arva loiba. Even though you don't need yourself to eat the Eruv. The Eruv doesn't have to be custom made for you. But the very fact that because of the Eruv, let's say if it's Eruv Tchumen, this will allow you to walk along a farther distance, your shavers from that place, you're having Hana. If you made a vow not to have Hana from these loaves of breads, they may not be used. Says the Gemara Meisvei, we're challenging the sheet of Rafuna. It says in a Braisa, Hanoidir min hakikar. Now it's not clear. He vowed to abstain. Says the Braisa ma'arvin loy ba. Now, l'chu'ura, my love, that the Omar Olai, a normal vow. If a person says that Kiker Zu Olai, and still l'chu'ura tzmashma, that Kiker Zu Olai also could mean only usher to eat. That's the question here. And if that would be the case, then if you can have Hana, then you can use it. So the Gemara says, no. That the Omar Zu, the case is that he said, Tikar Zu. And what's the Zu? How does that help? So very important. Rashi writes, I'm reading inside Rashi, Loi the Omar Zu, Shvua Shalai Oichel Kikar Zu. Remember that. When you see the word Zu, it means more eating, for whatever reason. So, and the Chanabi, if you made a vow not to eat, like Rafuna himself says, then you can use it. And hachinami misnabra, that the ratio of the Braisa must mean that he made a vow only regarding eating. Because since it says in the Sefer, Amosai, that you can still use it. Bisman she'amar shvua, shaloi et amena, clear. That's only when he clearly spoke about being toyim, tasting. Is araya that the whole ratio is only about eating. So the Gemara says, hold on. If that's the pshat in the Sefer, so now the Gemara is saying, what Abel Amar Olai Mai, it would mean that if he says the word Olai, Hachinami, the Ein Ma'arvinarba, if the Braisa actually is implying like Rafuna, again, even though he doesn't say the words Hana, if he says a very generic statement, Kikar Zu Olai, if that taka means in the Braisa, like Rafuna, that it's also about Hana, then it won't fit. Because Sihachi, later in the Braisa, towards the end of the Braisa, or at the end of the Braisa, the Tani, when the Braisa concludes by telling you what type of bread may not be used. So the case the Braisa gives is Tikerzu Hegdish. The guy Taki gives it away to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, Hegdish is also Bahana. Ema Arvamba. Why did the Braisa have to give such an extreme case? And the Braisa says, Lafisha Ema Arvin Behegdeshis, obviously. Because the very fact that no one can derive benefit from it, you can't use it for a native. So asks the Gemara, Lif like the litna bidida. The Amarzu. Abel Amarolai is a Ma'arvaba. Is the Haraya that even when you say a lie, you could use it. So now we are being medayek from the end of the Braisa again against Rafuna. So Amalach Rafuna, hold on. Elamai. So what are you telling me? That Kol Hecha the Amarolai, not like me, you still can use it. You didn't resolve, well, you refuted me, but then the Braisa needs to be explained because Kasha Reisha, because the Reisha was when he said Kikarzu. Why did the Reisha say Kikarzu? If even when the person says Olai, you still can make the Eruv, so then the Reisha doesn't fit. And therefore, so L'chaira, you're saying, well, you're Medayik from the Sefer, I'm Medayik from the Reisha. So this is what Rafuna is trying to argue, and the Gemara counters him, and the Gemara says, no, Rafuna. That I will learn, me meaning we against Rafuna. We'll learn the following. Why is that? Because even when he says Olai, and if that, and the only time you can't use bread is if you were magdish it. And if that will be the pshat in the Braisa, so Rafuna, and Rafuna has to concede that you're right in the way you are learning this Braisa holds that if a person, even though he says Kikar Zu Olai, we are able to understand his statement as only an Isur Achila, and yes, it could be used. How can Rafuna, first of all, Rafuna is quoting Rav, which is a Bechlal, not the end of the world. Rav can be Machalik, Rav Tano Palik. But the Gemara says that Rafuna has another Tana. So Rav will pass like another Tana. The Tanya Rabbi Eliezer, Omer, Shvua, clear. Shvua Shaloi Oichel Kikar Zu. If he says clearly that the Isra is only on eating, then Ma'arva Loiba, but Kikar Zu Alai, a Ma'arva Loiba. Okay, now the question will be on Rabbi Eliezer himself. The Hatanya have another Braisa that quotes Rabbi Eliezer that says differently. It says that Adam Oiser Atzma Ba'oichol means when a person prohibits eating a certain food by him explicitly saying that the prohibition, whether it's a shvua, whether it's an edit, isn't eating. Since it's only an isur of achila, which means he may have hana'ah, then he can use it for an eruv because you don't need to eat the eruv. You're benefiting from the eruv, no problem. But this is all the Braisa oichel hanesar loyla adam. But if a person asers food, asers means bahana'ah, completely aser, then says the Braisa ema arvan loyba. Right? This taka sounds like Rafuna, but let's go to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Kikar Zu Alai still Ma'arvan Loiba. Because the words Kikar Zu Alai, even though it's as a generic, I vow to abstain, you can still understand him to mean only from eating. It's only when Kikar Zu Hegdish, then a Ma'arvan Loiba. Because Lafisha Ma'arvan Hegdishis. So now we find for the Rafuna, by the way, now they have a new Braisa, Rafuna can say like the Tanakama. But now you have a seed on Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara says, the There's a machlokes what Rabbi Eliezer holds. There's a Trei Tanoi about Aliyah the Rabbi Eliezer. Point is, one theme, that even though a guy says, I will not eat those breads, he asserted it b'shvur b'neder, you can use it, still fits. We're going to have a lot more of this on Amud Beis, because the Eruv doesn't mean that it's not for you, it's for general. It's mazin shtei seudas. And even if you cannot eat it, oichet good. And all that fits with the Tanach in the Mishnah that says that a nazir can put yayin, he can't drink the wine, so what? Other people can drink it. That the Tanach holds that a Yisrael can use truma, so what? You can't eat it. A kohen can eat it. Okay. Now, Yayin says the Gemara that our Mishnah is not like Beis Shammai. The Tanya Beis Shammai Yomrim ein ma'arvin l'nazir b'yayin, and a Yisrael may not use truma. Beis Hillel Yomrim, yes, ma'arvin l'nazir b'yayin. And now the Braisa elaborates the back and forth between the Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Amru lahem Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel I atem moedim daf lamed on the base shema arvin legadol b'yoyim hakipurim. Guys, this is great, right? On Yom Kippur, like Shabbos, we also may not walk behind the tchum, beyond the tchum. Now, what are we using for an eruv? Either you're ma'arev beraglov, you're going yourself there for the end of the day, for the beginning of the new day, or you're putting mazon shtei seudas. How does that work? The answer is because even though that a gadol is prohibited to eat on Yom Kippur, a katan can eat on Yom Kippur. Again, it's not for you, it's food. And are you not moided that works? So just like you're moided for that, you should be moided that a nazir, for example, can put wine. So Amru Lahem, regarding whether you can be ma'arev for an adult by putting food, Beis Shammai told Beis Hillel, avol. Interesting. Avol, Rashi says emes. Why don't they say emes? Because it's an exception. Abed. Abed here means emes. Interesting expression. So Beis Hillel tells Beis Shammai, if you're saying emes, Amru Lahem, this is Beis Hillel to Beis Shammai. So Keshem Shema Arvan L'Gadol V'Yam Kippurim is Kain Ma'arvan L'Nazir B'Yayin L'Nazir B'Truma. So says the Gemara, no, that Beis Shammai will hold that over there, Hassan meaning over there by Yom Kippur. This is so important. Let me introduce a topic that we're going to learn in a few days from now. Daf Lamed Vav. Here are the words. The words are, this is the question, do we say Soif Hayoim Koine Eruv? Soif Hayoim Koine Eruv means that if I am taking in my Makayim Hashvisa at the place of my Eruv, when exactly do we say it's as if I am there? When do I need to be there to count the 2,000 amas from the place of the Eruv? Option number one is Soif Hayoim. Soif Hayoim means, guys, it's day, it's Ben Hashmashos, and then it's night. Soif Hayoim means one instant before Bein Hashmashos. Sometimes Chazal use the words in the beginning of Bein Hashmashos, but it doesn't mean that from our Gemara. It means taka at the end of the day. Now this is great. If Soif Hayoim Koina, so then Soif Hayoim Erev Yom Kippur you can eat. Beis Shammai holds that the Eruv means that you have to eat it for you. L'chayda, this also will mean that he'll hold that it has to be according to your size. If you're a giant, you have to have 2 giant meals. V'chulei. The Eruv is not to be eaten on Shabbos. The Eruv is not to be eaten on the day that you may not work. It's Soif Hayoim. Soif Hayoim at Yom Kippur, there's a mitzvah to eat. And in other words, the Gemara is really also saying in between the lines that Beis Hillel will subscribe to the other Shita just to say the words. The other words is Tchilas Hayoim Kaina Eruv. Tchilas Hayoim means the new day, Shabbos day. If Tchilas Hayoim Kaina Eruv, then on Yom Kippur you cannot eat. So Beis Hillel Shitasai will hold, since everyone agrees that Ma'arvin L'Gadol on Yom Kippur you can make an Eruv Tchumen. That's a Raya. And since he holds that Tchilas Hayoim it doesn't have to be eaten. It doesn't need to be eaten. It has to be edible. And there are minors out there that can eat. Beis Shammai l'shita that holds that Soif Hayoim Koina, there's no proof from Ma'arvin L'Gadol B'Yom HaKippurim. It works because the Eruv has to go into effect a moment before Shabbos, a moment before Yom Kippur. At the end of the prior day, there's no Isra Achil. Says the Gemara, but over there, but over here, meaning by the Nazir, like a Suda, even for the Nazir. Very good. Now the Gemara makes a point. Okay, you introduced to me Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Both of them, even Beis Shammai, the premise of this back and forth, the premise is that an Eruv is comprised of Mazon Shtei Seudas. The question is, again, like we said, that for a Nazir, Yayin is not considered Mazon Shtei Seudas because the Nazir cannot consume wine. This whole concept that an Eruv Tchumen is good enough as long as you have Mazon Shtei Seudas doesn't fit Hananiah's version of what Beis Shammai holds. Hananiah has a whole different Beis Shammai. He has a Messiah from a whole different sheet on Beis Shammai. None of this would fit. What does Hananiah hold in Beis Shammai? So the Gemara says, come on, this entire Braisa, the premise is the Loich Hananiah in the sheet of Beis Shammai. The Tanya Hananiah Omer, Kol Atzman Shal Beis Shammai, that Bechlal, the whole sheet of Beis Shammai is, they never agreed, they never conceded. And even Mazon Shtei Seudas that you can eat is enough. That's not enough. All of your utensils, and by the way, that includes all of the food that you plan to eat on Shabbos, has to be at the location of your Eruv Tchumen. What do you mean Mazon Shtei Seudas? The pshat is you can't walk more than 2,000 amas, even if it's only midrabanan. So how does Eruv work? It's as if you are there. Yeah, it's as if you're there, according to Rashi, according to Hananiah Beis Shammai, as if we don't say you have to be there. Not only do you have to be there, but if you're going to stop walk in a field and go to a place and just wait for Bein Hashmashes and go back home, it's also not good enough. You have to bring everything you need to spend the whole Shabbos there. Then it's emes. Then, like any other place, you can walk back 2,000 amas, you can walk forward 2,000 amas. It's a very chomer dekashita of the only way that an Eruv will work. And guys, Rashi adds over here the way people understand Rashi means this to be something essential, that not only according to Beis Shammai, L'Hananiah, do you have to take everything you need, your bed, everything you need to spend 25 hours to spend Shabbos Kodesh, you also have to be there. Now the Gemara says, now Anukash, who will be the author of the following Braisa, that Eirav B'Shchayrim, that if when the Eruv was made, you were wearing black clothing, that's the taich, then L'Yotze B'Levanim, then you may not go beyond your original tchum. You cannot go from the food tchum, you cannot go from there with white clothing if it's going out of the 2,000 amas of where your home is. Or B'Levanim, if you were wearing white garments, Lo Yetze B'Shchayim, right? Like, why? So now we understand it. Come on, who will that be like? That this must be the shita of Hananiah of the version of Beis Shammai. In other words, what did we learn right now? That you have to take all of what you will be using on Shabbos to the place of your Eruv. And if you didn't bring everything that you need there, then you don't have an Eruv Tchumen. So this fits. In other words, if you now decided, I'm not going to wear the black clothing that I had, I want to now take another set of clothing, that means that you didn't have it with you. If you didn't have it with you, then you can't wear those garments. But that doesn't really work, my friends, because really, according to Hananiah, according to Beis Shammai, the only way the Eruv Tchumen works is if you took there to that place everything that you're going to use. So l'chayra, it should be even more chamor. That if you decide on Shabbos to wear another type of clothing, another set of clothing, that should retroactively disqualify the Eruv to the point that even if you're going with the clothing that you did have, it should also not be valid. Which is the next kasha of the Gemara. Says the Gemara,
Rabbi, yes. 1 second. What's this whole change of clothing that we're learning here? Is the clothes at the Eruv site or it's at his house?
The clothing, the way the pshat and the braisa would be is that at the Eruv site you had shchayrim, and now you want to go back to your house and take out a new set of clothing, and the braisa says you may not do it. So this has to be according to Hananiah, according to Beis Shammai.
Because right now, the way we understand it, that clothes is not in the Eruv site, and everything has to be there. That's what we're saying?
Yes. And now the Gemara is going to say even more than that. The Gemara is going to say that really, according to Hananiah, according to Beis Shammai, if I who have to bring everything that I want to use on Shabbos to the Eruv site. If I didn't bring everything over there, meaning that if during Shabbos I decide I want to bring another set of clothing, you know what that will do according to Hananya, according to Beis Shammai? It's going to invalidate the Eruv completely. Even the clothing that were there cannot be used because it shows that you did not take in Shabbos there. You were still relying on your home. It's only b'shchayim u'delo yatsa. Levanim, yes, yatsa, no. No, it's the concept of Hananiah's version of Beis Shammai is that you want to count 2,000 amas from a new location, you have to physically be there and you have to have everything that you need on Shabbos over there. And if you're missing that, then the whole thing is not valid. And the Gemara says, indeed, that is the pshat in the Braisa. Hachika Amar, that if Eirav, when you had only white clothing, and then then you realize that you need to have black clothing. That's what the Braisa is saying. And now we at least identified who the author is. And indeed, come on, that must be Hananiah, not Hananiah, our Mishnah's version in the sheet of Beis Shammai, or the first Braisa, at least of Naflam and Amadal from the bottom, that the sheet of Beis Shammai will be, you don't have to bring everything there, but one thing, you have to bring what's custom made for you. Mazin shtei seudos, but for you. You have to at least be able to partake of it. So therefore, Beis Shammai will hold that again, a Nazir cannot use Yayin. Beis Shammai will hold that a Yisrael cannot use Truma. L'chura, Beis Shammai will hold that if this guy is a Rafton, as we began, and for him 2 meals means who knows what, he eats like Oig Malach HaBashan, then he has to have 2 such meals. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Sumchas argued with the Tanakama only regarding Chulin. He says, no, Yisrael could only put Chulin. Now, Sumchas did not say that a Nazir cannot use Yayin. Sumchas did not say. Sumchas is not Beis Shammai. Question is, what's the logic? Why would he differentiate? If Sumchas is insisting that Yisrael may not use Truma, the Ilul and Nazir B'Yayin Le'Palig, so what logic is there? Either it has to be for you, or it has to be Mazin 2 sodas for out there. So the Gemara says like this, that there has to be at least the potential for you to be able to partake of it. When it comes to a Nazir, since a Nazir is at the end of the day a form of a neder, and every neder could be retroactively nullified, you can be matir, nedarim, hataras nedarim. So since Efsher, the Mitchell, Anizirusei, that's why it doesn't bother Sumchas for a Nazir to use Yayin, because theoretically he can consume the Yayin. Masha'en came Truma. So the Gemara right away counters, hold on. Ihachi Truma Nami, after the Mitchell Ilave, a person, guys, it's interesting, Truma, you have Tevel. You separated the 2%, the Beninus, and you separated, all of that is like a vow, which means that if you find a Pesach, you can retroactively nullify all those designations. So what's the difference? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you the difference. It's Gavaldik. What happens if this person is going to be shoyal on his neder of Truma, and the Truma will go away? But what comes back to its place? See, by a Nazir, if a Nazir takes away his neder, then he's mutter to consume Yayin. If a person takes away the Truma, what happens? What was here prior to Truma? Tevel. Tevel may also not be consumed. Gavaldik answer. So you can't eat it, not nishtahed nishtahin. Says the Gemara, says the Gemara, hold on. I know that. Step number 1 is you can be shoyal on the Truma. Yes, it's Tevel, but so what? The lifresh Allah mimakim acher. Now, guys, I know that many people are thinking, we know already that midrabanan, you can't separate Trumas on Shabbos. We'll get to that in a moment. That will be the final answer. But before we get to there, a person, theoretically, even if all that is in front of you is something that you want to consume, if it's Tevel, you could b'diavad say that the food that I have in my house, that should be Truma for this. That's called, my friend, Shaloi min hamukov. Remember those words. We keep on learning these dinim. It's good to chazir. Min hamukov means that ideally, when you separate Trumas or Maisras, as long as it is min hayafa ala yafa, it's from the same quality, same type, same quality, same year, then still it's important for everything to be near each other. Remember that, because there is a fear that if you're going to say from that which is in my house, there should be the truma for this, maybe that was destroyed, maybe that was burnt, maybe that is no longer there. So the Gemara is saying, hold on, you can do it memaka macher. So the Gemara says, yeah, you could, but we don't do that. So the Gemara says, so what? Okay, you can only separate trumas from maasros from what's in front of you. But so what? Number one, even though it's truma, you can be shoyl and make it into tevel. Number two, if you have in front of you more than mazen shtei seudos, even only by a little bit, you can separate some of what you have in front of you as new truma. Only 2%, and really on a biblical level, anything, and all the rest is not going to be tevel. The lifresh Allah mineu bei. So the Gemara says, listen, if you were to have in front of you more than the minimum required 2 meals, then potentially you can be shoyl on the neder of truma. You can retroactively bring it back into tevel, and you can be mafresh from what you have in front of you, the truma. But what's going to happen? The leis b'shiyura. What happens if what you have in front of you is exactly mazen shtei seudos? There's no way for you to be mated to make it for you mutter b'achila, because if you have mazen shtei seudos exactly, and now you're going to separate some of it for truma, boom, you don't have the minimum share. But the Gemara is still not happy with that, because if that's the only reason for sumches, umay paska. Paska means when you give a psak, when you give a absolute ruling, then really it's not absolute. Are you telling me that sumchas will hold that in some scenarios, which is when you have a little bit more than a minimum amount, but then even he'll be moida to the Tanakama that a Yisrael can use truma? He should have said that. He shouldn't have given an absolute ruling that no, that a Yisrael has to use chulin. So the Gemara says, no. The real reason is because even if he were to have a lot more than mazen shtei seudos, you cannot resolve it on Shabbos. A nazir can be mated as neder. Truma cannot become, that food cannot become permitted. To take away the status of truma, you could, but it's going to become tevel. Eloma, you're going to be mafresh trumas again. Guys, midrabanan, we're not allowed to be mafresh trumas or maasros on Shabbos. Remember that? Tikkun mana. It's not discernible, but midrabanan you can't do it. Now there's another detail we have to remember, and that is that there are some shittas that hold that all of the Isuri Darabanan only go into effect when it's Shabbos Vadai, which means when it's Teis HaKechavim. And during Bein HaShmashos, right, Ein Shvus Ve'Bein HaShmashos. I want you to know that we even pass in that way. I'll give you an example. Amida La'akum. Amida La'akum, according to the Alter Rebbe, is very chamur. It's Mitam Shlichus. Shlichus La'akum L'chumra. Nevertheless, Bein HaShmashos, I can tell a guy to do something for me. Oh, and what did we just spoke about? We just spoke about whether it's soif hayoim koine eruv, whether it's tchilas hayoim koine eruv. Even tchilas hayoim koine eruv means during bein hashmashos. During bein hashmashos. So the Gemara says that sumchas obviously holds like the Rabbanan l'chumra, that the Amri, that even something that's only also only because of Shavuos still goes through all of bein hashmashos. So therefore, yeah, you can take away the truma status, but it's going to go back into tevel. In the case where you have enough food here in front of you to separate again only a little bit for trumas, you can't do that. You only need the eruv to be in effect bein hashmashos. Even bein hashmashos, you may not do it. So there's never the potential for you to be allowed to eat it, which is why sumchas, when it comes to truma, says Yisrael may only use chulim. Masha'inkin sumchas is moida that a nazir, yes, could use yayin, because potentially he can drink it, bite it. Says the Gemara, there are instances where they said, listen to these words, hakoil lefi ma shehu adam, that measurements, this is the topic of Daf Lamed, is determined according to each individual, not the way we're saying, but there's a braisa, and we're going to see who the author is, that measurements is determined according to each individual. And what is this braisa referring to? He's giving various Gavaldic examples. Whenever we need to have maloi kumtzai, in the whole kachim, when it comes to menachos, so there's an inyan of taking off a kemitza, right? A kemitza means that you have to stick your hand in a certain way down into a bowl, and you're going to bring up the flour and dough or the broken pieces of bread, or there's so many different menachas into your hand, and you're going to use your thumb to make sure nothing is protruding beyond your index finger. You're going to use your pinky to make sure that nothing is protruding beyond your ring finger. And then you're going to have exactly the flour that's inside, that's called your klaimitz. So let me ask you, how much flour do you have to have in there? The flour in your klaimitz. What happens if you have a klein with a große hand and you have a klein a midget with a kleine Händele? We don't make a standard size. We do say every klein does according to his own measurement. Another example, on Yom Kippur, when the klein gadol goes into the kachim, so how much ketaitis does he use? So that's the whole chachma of getting the spoon in his mouth, and he has to take he cups both of his handfuls. That's the amount of ketaitis. Well, is there a shiur? Yeah, your handfuls. It's kefi mashu adam. Or the Braisa continues the rule that when is a person, God forbid, going to be chayv kadis for breaking the inoi on Yom Kippur of drinking. What's the shiur for that? Cheekful. Well, what's the cheekful? Is it an ounce number? No, it's my cheekful. Or look at this Braisa. In other words, it's for your 2 meals. Who is that author? Come on. We definitely don't want to quote Beis Shammai, but it's better, even according to Beis Hillel. We see over here, right, it's only 2 meals, but Amar Abzeda, now we know it's sumchasi. That what? The Amar, Maduchazi Leibo Inen. See, we're making this link. Sumchas did not speak about the shiurim. Sumchas never opined about a rafton. Doesn't matter. The fact that Sumchas doesn't allow a Yisrael to use Truma, that's because he needs to be able to eat the 2 meals. So if he needs to be able to do 2 meals, it's logical to say that the requirement for the Shtei Seudos is his requirement. So says the Gemara, if that's the case, Lema Pliga, that Rav Shimon Elazar, like we learned from the beginning of today's daf, the time of Shimon Elazar, Omer, Ma'arvin L'chayl L'zak Nedei Mezoyne L'raftam Mesuru Beinish shall call Adam. In other words, that a raftam clearly doesn't need to have 2 large meals, so L'chayr Sumchas will disagree with that. So now the Gemara says, in the concept, Sumchas disagrees with it, but not in this case. Targuma, we can teach that the Braisa of Rav Shimon Elazar also goes according to Sumchas. And you know what? We keep on skipping the Reisha. Yeah, the second part of the Braisa says that if a glutton eats, I don't know, a ton of meat for every meal, he doesn't eat 2 tons. But the Braisa began speaking about a chayla, that if you have someone that's sick, that the sick person, because of the illness, eats very little. Fakert, the Braisa says that you can take little. Adarabah, the Braisa is custom measuring the Eruv for your individual needs. Raftan is an exception. That Targuma, Fakert, Sumchas will be aligned with the Chayla and the Zaken. Abel Raftan, since, thank God, that we consider a glutton something extremely unusual. Something extremely unusual. Here we go back to this concept of Batladai to Eitzel Kol Adam. Oh, Fakert, this Braisa does fit. Rav Shimon Elazar fits with Sumchas. And really what we're saying over here is maybe in the reverse, that if we don't follow Sumchas, then maybe by a Chayla and a Zaken, if it's not individually measured, maybe you're going to be Machmer. Interesting. Let's go back. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you are allowed to place the Eruv after Beis HaKvaris. Even though a Kohen may not enter a Beis HaKvaris, so how does the taka work? He cannot even get to it. So Tani, we learned in a Braisa explaining the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, because again, theoretically he could get to it. He can create a halachic chatzitza interposition between him and the Beis HaKvaris, which will be leilach. He can enter the Beis HaKvaris b'shida tevel u'migdol. Guys, don't think about how we remember as children how people going to the oil. We're speaking something more. We're speaking about someone who's going into a box, and the floor under the box, it's a self-contained area, so people can carry this box even over kavarim, because he is in a standalone own domain, and therefore he can get to the Eruv. Now, says the Gemara, Kum Techois, Kosavar, This Tana holds in explaining Rabbi Yehuda that oil zaruk shmei oil. This is a big topic that a moving tent is a moving tent considered a tent. Is a moving tent considered a tent? This is a very halacha l'maisa question, because I just give you an example that the tumah of a kaver goes up to the heavens. And how can a kohen go on an airplane if it's going over a cemetery? So if it's going over a non-Jewish cemetery, you're fine. We can rely on the Rashbi that holds that only Adam, Atam, Kuruyim Adam is Matama to Masoil. Adam Kiyamas Masoil. But if it's going over a Yiddish cemetery, so Taka, I want you to know that if we will hold that oil zaruk lav shemei oil, you got yourself a problem. But Rabbi Yehuda holds that even a moving tent is called a tent, so it creates a chatzitza. And Chazal made a takana that if you enter even only the avira, they began by making a takana, if you touch the gush of Eretz Amim, you become tamei. The reason is because the goyim were not careful to mark their graves. And even according to the Rashbi, the actual bone, the body of a goy, of a corpse, is matame. So maybe the kohen is walking on top of a corpse. Maybe there's a little fragment of a bone. Then they said that not only is the gush eretz amim matame, but avira the eretz amim matame. Nevertheless, if you want to enter eretz amim, you are kohen, and you want to go in there b'sheda table migdal. So you are in a standalone environment. Rabbi says it doesn't work. Rabbi Mitami. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Mitayel. What is their machlekes? This is the machlekes. But Michael Miflegi, Marsava, that's Rabbi, that oil, zaruk, lav, shmei oil. So it cannot interpose by the very fact that it's moving. By the way, we spoke this out way back. I forgot when we learned this last. Maybe he has over here from Gittin or from Nazir, that don't confuse you being carried in a box in the air with you going in a car. Even though the car is moving, since the wheels of the car are on the ground, it's better. It's not called the oil zaruk. We're speaking dafka about something that's flying in the air, being carried. It's less kavua. Less kavua is like a machlekes tanoim. Umar Savar, which is Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, that oil zaruk, shmei oil. And indeed, our Rabbi Yehuda, the father of Rabbi Yossi, will also subscribe to that. And let's go further. We learned in another brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Omer daf lamed aleph, that ma'arvin l'koyin tahor b'truma tahira. By the way, before we explain the brayso, if the koyin is tamei, then if we're going to go like sumches, if we're going to go with the shitas that the eruv has to be edible for you, then you can't use truma tahira. So that's why the brayso is not getting into that. That if you have truma tahira, the koyin is tahir, but you put the truma in a kaver. Now, guys, don't confuse the kaver in the case of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah was a beis hakvaros. A beis hakvaros, b'chlal, you cannot enter it. Here we're speaking, there's no beis hakvaros, but it's in a kaver. You put it in a kaver. Now, a kaver itself is matame. So it says in the brayso that you could, it's valid, but we are saying that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's only valid because even you can get to it. How can you get to it? So the Gemara wants to speak out. Hey, chi azul, how will you go there? So b'sheda tevel migdal. The Gemara says it's not so pasha that. But given the achta, the moment you put the truma in there, you put the truma in the kaver. So didn't it make the truma tamei? Appreciate the kasha. If we would not hold like Rabbi Yehuda needs to justify shade the table migdal, if we will hold like the chachamim of our Mishnah, if we will hold that b'chlal and eruv doesn't mean that you have to eat it. We wouldn't care if the kohen's eruv is in a kaver. But no, we are going now in the latter part of the Mishnah with those tanaim that hold no, it has to be for you. You have to be able to eat it. Why is it okay to have it on the beis hakvaros? Because you can get there. But now if we're speaking about you put the food in the kaver, the food itself will become tamei. And like we mentioned, if truma is tamei, that a kohen cannot eat it. No one can eat it. So the Gemara says it must be that what is the case of the brayso, that the truma is not even susceptible to becoming tamei. Many people take out the word oi, but the next words is explaining why it's shalai yuchshira, because sheni loy sheba mei peris. It's interesting. You have food, if after you cut the grain, the stalks off the ground, it never got wet. Never wet berotz and abalim. And even when you made it into a dough, made it into a product, you never used water. You never used any of the Zion. You didn't use water. You didn't use oil. Yes, then this food item is not even susceptible. But the were still is bothered. But the heichamaitzel, how will he take it? So the kohen is going on top of the kaven because he's in a box. But how will the kohen retract it? He'll have to stick his hand out of the box. His hand will go in the airspace of the kaven. He'll become tummy. It must be that no, he doesn't go out of the box, that he has as a keli, and it has to be a keli that the keli itself is not suspect to tuma. The pshute kleyates, the MERCAVA tuma. That's one more line.
Not suspect, susceptible.
Susceptible, very good. Hold on, let's say this is my pshute kleyates, but if I'm holding on to this, some of my hand is under it. I know, hold on to any small keli. Some is on top, some fingers are under. If I'm going to put that pshute kleyates into the grave, into the hole in the ground, into the cavity, and take out the food, so then some of my hand is under the pshute kleyates, some of the kaven is under the pshute kleyates, so I will become tummy because of tumas oil. Answers the Gemara, the ma'aseh le'achoyre, that it must be that the edge, the part of the kleyates that the kohen is holding on to, doesn't even have a tefach with tumas oil, is only under an oil. The size of an oil is a tefach or more. The kohen is only holding the edge of it doesn't have the tefach. So even though his fingers are under that instrument and the other edge is over the cave, it doesn't matter. It won't be metamehim. It will not be metamehim. The final question, how does an eruv work? An eruv works because we're saying it's as if I'm koina my shvisa, I'm taking in Shabbos there where my food is. For a kohen, it's in a kaven. A kaven is something from which he may not go into. I'm sorry, my comment that Rabbanon, because the Rabbanon will hold, Kosavri also liknais bayis. Liknais bayis doesn't mean to buy a house. It means eruv. When you put an eruv tchumen, you are acquiring your house for Shabbos. You can't acquire your dwelling place in an area that for the kohen is asur b'hana. And again, l'shitas, these tanoim, that the eruv is custom made for you. For a kohen, I'm taking it back. Better, even no one can have hana from a kaver. That's the word. No one can have hana from a kaver. So even if it doesn't have to be for me, how can you be koina makim of shvisa in a kaver? According to the Chachamim, it's asur b'hana. Now we're going to continue tomorrow asking why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of that. We're going to have to still work out shitas Rabbi Yehuda. God willing to be continued.
Shkayach.